See what ASD is all about this year. It's gonna be exciting for sure.
Hi, my name is Kyle Graves, owner of Synergy Freight. Hope you enjoy my speech on life and logistics.
So yeah, hi, I'm Kyle Graves. I'm CEO of Synergy Freight. We do a lot of work in the liquidation space. A lot of you guys probably know me. If you don't, I'll probably pick something up at your warehouse without you knowing, so that's okay. I'm based out of Arizona, grew up in New Hampshire, and that's really important to me. Not a lot of people come from New Hampshire, but I think, in this day and age, it's really important. Where you grew up really defines and shapes how you are as a person. And growing up there, we learned honesty, hardworking, transparency, and it's really the foundation of my success as an adult. I was gonna give you guys a stiff corporate talk about freight and FTL and LTL and what you should do, what you shouldn't do, but I really think it would be more impactful for me to talk to you a little bit about my background, my story, kind of how I got to this point in life. I did liquidation with my dad when I was 15, selling stuff on Amazon, as I'm sure a lot of you guys do now, e-commerce. And being 15, he was able to hire me for $200 a week, go child labor, And I handled picking, packing, doing all the orders, stuff like that. And that's what really taught me about logistics and also liquidation. So fast forward to 2019, I was working for a large logistics company in Phoenix, and I loved what I did, but I didn't love who I did it for. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have probably been in that situation before where you love your job, you love what you're doing, you just don't really like who you're doing it for, and you don't understand the why. So I ended up going to an event that you guys may have heard about in the news last year, Burning Man. Last year it was called Mud Man. But I went to try to find that why in life. Why am I here? Why am I on this planet? What is the purpose of all of this? So I went and talked everybody's ear off in camp about logistics and trucking and freight and all these things that I wanted to do, and I had the same reaction as Jack Ma's friends and family. If you guys know Jack Ma, he's the founder of Alibaba, and the way that he started was he met with his friends and family, he explained Alibaba, the idea, he had 30 of his friends and family over. They all pretty much left and said, "We don't know what the heck you're talking about, you're crazy." But one of his uncles said, you are kind of crazy, I don't understand what you're talking about, but if you have this passion and conviction for what you're talking about, I think you'll be successful. So that was kind of my experience going there, was, all my friends being like, "Kyle, stop talking about this logistics stuff, I don't know what you're talking about, but if you have this kind of passion, you should just follow it." So I did what every reasonable, conservative entrepreneur did. I went back home with $2,000 in my pocket and I quit my job. Very reasonable thing to do, right? And I decided that I wasn't going to live afraid. I think a lot of times you get to these points in life where you have to make a decision. Do I jump or do I stay? And I think that a lot of times we're afraid, and society kind of makes us afraid to make those decisions and to take that leap of faith. But that's exactly what I did. I took that leap and I really bet on myself and had to work really hard. Again, I had $2,000. I had all the same bills that we all have. So it was a very scary time, but you just bet on yourself, you believe in yourself and what you're doing, and you move forward and you just take that leap of faith. Quit my job, started the logistics business. This was the end of 2019. I'm sure you guys all know what happened that next year. COVID happened. So not only did I start the business with no money really, just a dream, but I also started it right when COVID happened. And this was actually a blessing in disguise. I was able to leverage, people from all over the world. When you're building a business, typically you're building it just in your area, but when COVID is shutting everything down, you have to get creative. So I reached out to people in other countries, people in other states, and kind of grew the business that way by leveraging people all over the world. And in doing so, I was able to be successful, and I made it through kind of the beginning phases of the business. In starting the business, like I've mentioned, in life you are trying to find the why. And what I found from starting a logistics business is my why is helping people to accomplish things they can't accomplish on their own. You know, it's a very powerful thing when you can help one of your customers. You guys all work in wholesale, closeout, liquidation. When you're able to help your customer build a business and you're able to meet their family, meet their kids, meet their husbands, and you can see the impact that what you do has on their life, has on their family, has on them as an individual, that for me was like my drug. You know, that's what makes me feel like a Superman, is when I can help people grow their business, to be more successful, to make their life easier. So in starting that business and in logistics, I was able to find my why, which is helping people. So that's kind of my background, and I wanted to start with that, not to kind of talk about myself, but I really want to try and motivate people to take those chances in life, to take those risks. You know, we only live once, and you have to, you know, try to not live in fear of failure and fear of the unknown, and you have to sometimes just take that leap of faith and hope that you land on your feet. You know, logistics can be up and down just like liquidation, and you know, sometimes you just have to put your best foot forward and make a real effort towards trying to be successful, even if you don't know what that success looks like. So in liquidation, you're always having to adjust, and you're always having to adapt and be flexible. Sometimes you're buying a load and all of a sudden that load goes to crap. It used to be a good load, they raise the price, the quality goes down. How are you going to adapt to that? So you always have to be flexible, and you always have to be trying to find the next thing. You know, if you're not growing your business, then your business is dying and shrinking. So you always have to be looking for that new thing to build off of. As far as the logistics goes, who here ships LTL? Pretty much everybody? Okay. Who here gets hit with rebills for LTL? Pretty much everybody? Who likes them? Nobody. Okay. So in logistics, one of the most important aspects that you have to always remember is correct data going in is one of the most important aspects. If you don't provide your vendor with the proper information, does it require a lift gate? You know, what's the weight? What's the dimensions? Is there a special delivery? Do they need to set an appointment? All of those things are going to factor into, you know, your overall cost. And a lot of times when you guys are shipping an LTL pallet, you're selling a pallet, you know, you're maybe making $200 on a pallet, $300, $400, $500. If you get hit with a rebill on a $300 margin pallet for $150, that's half of your profit. So you have to make sure that on these costs that are pass-throughs, you got to make sure that you don't get stuck holding the bag at the end of the day. Because there's nothing worse than getting that rebill, and then you're in the position of either eating that $150, or you have to go to your customer who just spent maybe thousands with you to ask them for $150. You kind of look cheap. So, you know, the accuracy of the information that you give your vendors is super critical to making sure that you're successful and that your vendors are successful. And if your logistics vendors are successful, then you are as well. The other big aspect with logistics is flexibility. So I know a lot of times in liquidation, we want something to show up at the right time, deliver at the right time, the right day. Sometimes there may be an ability where you have a customer who doesn't really care too much. You know, they say, just send it to me next week. Communicating that expectation to your vendor on the freight side is going to help you to save money. Because if you can tell your vendor, hey, it just needs to be there at some point next week, you're going to get a cheaper price. So a lot of customers that I work with in recycling or the pallet side of things, a lot of times those companies do what's called rolling loads. So if you're doing recycling and you have 50 loads somewhere and you're trying to get it somewhere else, you don't really care too much when it gets there, when it picks up. You're looking for the best price possible. So in those situations in liquidation, if you can communicate that and convey that to your vendor, you may be able to get a cheaper rate. If you say, hey, this doesn't have to ship, you know, maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it's all good, it doesn't matter. Communicating that effectively to them will help you negotiate that rate and get that rate down. And that's why those companies that do lumber, that do pallet recycling, that do recycling of metal, plastics, they're always going to have a cheaper cost on the freight than somebody who's saying it needs to pick up this day, it needs to deliver this day. And the opposite of that situation is I work with a lot of people who do Formula One, PGA Tour, events, music festivals, things like that. That kind of freight has to be there by the minute. They have crews waiting on it. So you have to make sure that that is there at the right time. And because of that, their average cost is going to be a lot higher than, say, a liquidator's cost. So it's really important to set the proper expectations with your vendors, make sure that you're communicating the accurate information to them, and that's going to set them up for success and helping you to service your customers and also do it at the lowest cost possible. So another big aspect of logistics, and especially with liquidation, is processes. So one thing that I've seen for my customers, the ones who have the least problems in logistics are all of the ones that have the best processes. So you need to have a process for collecting the information from your customer. What's their address? What are their hours of operations? What are their contact numbers? Things like that. It's important that you collect that in a standardized form. And then it's also important that you convey all of that information to your vendor in a standardized form. So I have some customers in liquidation that send over the same tender form every single time with the same pieces of information. That type of thing is how you're going to set your vendors up for success. If you don't provide all of the information accurately, you're going to be kicking yourself when you have a load pickup on a Friday, it's supposed to deliver on a Saturday, and then it doesn't get there until Monday. I'm sure every liquidator that sells a full truckload has been in that situation before, and it sucks. And you don't want to let your customers down and not get them the stuff when they need it. But that's why relaying that information to your vendors is so important to your success and your customers' success. So communicating that kind of stuff in a standardized form is going to be the best way to make sure that you're successful with your logistics endeavors. There's a lot of different vendors out there for freight. Everybody has their favorite person that they like. John likes Uber Freight. He also uses UShip. Different people use CH Robinson, TQL. At the end of the day, it's all kind of the same thing. What it comes down to is building that relationship with your vendors and making sure that they understand what your business is, what's really important to you, and then they can kind of execute based off of that. But it's all based on relationships, especially in logistics, having vendors and partners that you trust, that you can rely on, that you can call at 7 o'clock at night. That's the important part about logistics. So it doesn't matter who you use, what company you use, what their name is, where they live, none of that matters. It all depends on just having that relationship with your vendor and making sure that there's clear, concise communication between you. The other thing with logistics is that you have to have the right people involved. So it's all about the processes, and then it's also about the people. So setting up your team for success, your sales reps, maybe your warehouse workers, making sure that they're involved in the process is going to help you be successful. Making sure that they're aware of what trucks are going to be showing up and when is also very important. The last thing that I'll talk about in logistics is a common problem that's happening now. You guys in liquidation experience this more than anybody else, but fraud is up 500, 600, 700% in logistics, probably also in liquidation. If you guys go on Facebook, half the people posting loads out there are in Nigeria, Cameroon, Bangladesh, wherever they are, but it's all fraud and scams. That same type of thing happens in logistics all of the time. And actually, our next speaker, Travis, had the unfortunate experience of dealing with a theft ring with me last year. And it can be very, very hard to prevent fraud from happening in logistics. But a few of the things that you guys should implement and do is at your warehouse, you should be recording the MC number and the DOT number of every truck that picks up. You should be taking a picture of their license plate and their license, their driver's license. You should be recording all of that information every single load, because when something does go wrong, which if you ship thousands of loads in the industry, something will go wrong. Somebody will steal your load. Having all of that information is going to be key in dealing with FBI, DOT, your local cargo theft task force, whatever you have. And those types of things are really important to think about when you're loading these trucks. It's not just about loading the trucks. You have to confirm who's actually loading it, who's picking it up, what company they're with. That's going to save you because fraud right now in logistics is so rampant, and if you're not doing everything that you can to try to combat that, you're going to end up with an issue. And that also requires communicating with your vendors to make sure, hey, ABC Trucking Company is picking up at 3 o'clock. Make sure that when they come, it's ABC Trucking Company. Don't load Joe's Trucking, because Joe's Trucking, you don't know who they are and they don't know who they are. So it's really important to prevent fraud, to collect all that information, to save all that information, and the companies that do that end up with less issues at the end of the day.
All right, so we have a freight king. He works with a lot of people. It's a perfect time if any of you are having any issues or if you just have any questions. This is your time to shine and do it. Put them on the spot. Anybody have any questions? All right, hold on. Here we go.
All right. It seems like you have all these systems, right?
Yeah.
So with your team, what is like something that you guys do every day so everyone's on the same page? What do you call it? It could be like a meetup in the beginning of the day, a check-in, and what are some of the things, questions that you guys discuss during that meeting?
Yeah, good question. So every 2 hours, we call out any loads that we have that need to pick up that same day. So the most important thing in a logistics company is picking up the loads. Pretty simple. So every 2 hours, we're calling out all the loads that we have. We organize them and prioritize them by the latest pickup time. So we put a priority on the loads that have to pick up the earliest. If we have a 9 o'clock East Coast pickup, that needs to be the focus early in the day, and we need to make sure that we get that load covered and picked up. If we have a 5 o'clock pickup on the West Coast, that's going to be something for a little bit later in the day. We are admittedly Slackaholics, so we use Slack a lot. I really recommend it for pretty much everybody. I showed Damien, I think, our Slack like a year and a half ago, and he was like, holy crap. He's like, you got all this stuff in here? Every single email our company has, every department goes to Slack. We have forms that we fill out that go to Slack. Every time a customer sends us a load, it flows to Slack. And that gives somebody like myself at the top the visibility into what's going on. I can roll out of bed at 7 o'clock. I can look and see every email my company has gotten. If there's something that needs to be done with something, I can tag people and say, hey, load building team, I need you to build this, or you didn't build this right, or we need to adjust this, or I can tag my leadership team and say, hey, we need to put a focus on this. So Slack is super, super important in our process, and I can't recommend it enough to everybody. I think even in liquidation, something like that, some integration platform that you have as a communication hub will keep all of your employees and yourself on the same page.
All right, we got another question.
Quick question, Kyle. You were mentioning on the security aspect. As someone who would be receiving a load at just a general business, and then also someone who has a CDLA, if I would have shown up with a delivery and the person's like, hey, let me see your business, I'd be like, is that something we should be requesting before they pick up a load to know they have to show?
Pickup. It's for pickup. So that way, if the person runs away with your load and disappears, you have a driver's license. So when you call the police, you can give them the driver's license number and information. And if you're not collecting that, it just makes it really tough to know who picked up the load, you know? And I've had that even with, had a situation with Macy's where, you know, we sent in a truck to Macy's, the carrier that we booked on it said, oh, our truck broke down. They didn't end up going and picking it up. Somebody else went and picked it up. And because Macy's didn't get that information, it made it really hard for them to work with the police and the authorities to find out who picked up the load. So it's just on the pickup side that you want to be doing that stuff. And that way if something happens, you have it. But there's a lot of shippers that do that now. There's a lot of companies that do that. So I think it's pretty normal. But yeah, I mean,
I was thinking more on the delivery aspect when I heard you say that. So on pickup, I understand because I pick up loads myself at Home Depot with admin A.
Yeah.
And you have a security desk, so you don't even think twice giving your ID to get in.
Exactly.
When I heard you say that, I'm like, delivery, I question up the store, why do you want my?
Yeah.
Why do you want this?
No, not delivery, at pickup for sure. And you can also just take a picture of the side of the truck. That's an easy way too. Every truck is required to have an MC number and a DOT number on the side of the truck. It's for identification reasons. If they didn't have that, you'd just have trucks going all over the place, running into people, crashing into people, running over your lawn, and you don't know who they are. So it's really easy just to take a picture of the side of the truck and then save that into a folder, a Dropbox, something like that. That way you can go back and look and see exactly who it was that picked up.
All right, any other questions? I've got one. So,
Shoot.
we are in a big commerce trade show event, and you are specialists, so you hear everyone's pain points. What are some of the pain points that you are hearing and seeing today that you have recommendations of how they can get over it and be successful?
I think the biggest pain point is communication. You know, right now, as you guys are probably aware, the freight rates compared to 2 years ago are so much better. They're so much cheaper, they're so much lower. 2 years ago, we were paying through the nose for every load. It was crazy. But now that COVID's gone away, the prices have come down. What hasn't changed or improved is the communication. Logistics, as you guys probably can all attest to, is just known for terrible communication. Like it's just a known thing that freight companies suck at communicating, and like you call your guy 6 times, then he calls you back 6 hours later. By then, everything's ruined, the truck's not there, you don't know what the heck's going on. So I think communication's the biggest complaint from customers, and I think that a lot of it is just on the freight companies and who you're working with, but I think it's also on relationships. You know, if you're talking to your freight guy a lot, if you're learning more about him, you know, his family, his kids, you know, these types of things, you're building that relationship, I think you're gonna end up with better service and better communication. And also I think trying to find somebody who is invested in what they're doing. You know, sometimes working with large companies, there's great benefits to it. They have economies of scale, they have systems, they have technology. Sometimes what they don't have though is kind of the caring aspect. You know, when you're working with some guy who's one of 1,000 employees at some big company, you might get a guy who really cares and is awesome and you love him. You might have a guy who just got hired 3 months ago and just kind of, it's a job, like they don't care. So I think just finding the right person and communication is the biggest complaint that I hear, and that's what we try to do our best on is communication. So we set up a lot of Facebook message groups with our customers. If you've shipped with me, you probably have a group with me with my team in it, and you can ask them questions anytime, you know, night, day, weekend. Communication's super important in the industry.
Episode 3, Kyle Graves speaking on optimizing returns and unleashing potential using freight in the liquidation and closeout industry. If you're enjoying this series, here's the next episode. If you're enjoying the Nice Find Wholesale YouTube channel, make sure to subscribe and check out the rest of our videos.